So it is November the 15th and welcome to the start of my second NaNoWriMo vlog. It is very nicely the halfway mark of NaNoWriMo today. I am feeling very inspired, very into my book right now. This is the most engaged I have felt with the story since I started writing it. I feel like ever since I reached that point where I caught up to where I was in the original draft and started veering into like new content, I feel like I just struck inspiration, creativity gold, and I've been very excited to write. It's been really nice. Honestly, this is the most alive I've felt since lockdown started. Yesterday I had a pretty nice day of writing. I feel like some of the sections I was writing were a bit slower to write. I do find though, it's kind of funny. Obviously, my whole purpose for doing Nano this year was to just try to write every day and not care about the word count. But I've noticed that as I've been doing better and better than expected, because I'm doing way better than expected. Like I broke 20,000 words yesterday, which is literally what I thought I would write in the whole month. Like if you'd asked me coming in, how much do you think you'll write this month? I would have guessed about 20 to 25,000 words. And it's day 15 and I've written 20,000 words. So it's way more than I thought. And I think this weird part of my brain is going, you could actually win and you're gonna be so close to winning. Why don't you just do that extra little push and win, when literally the whole point of this was to lose intentionally, to take the pressure off myself. The better I've been doing at NaNoWriMo, the more it's pushing me to write more. Like if I was way farther behind, I wouldn't be feeling as inspired to write a lot. I haven't been having many days where I don't reach the 1667 whatever it is word count, but it hasn't been feeling like a burden. I believe that if I had actually made it my goal to win NaNoWriMo, at this point I would probably be on track and probably ahead. Like I'm not that far behind. I'm like a couple thousand words because I haven't written yet today and it's day 15, so you're supposed to be clocking in at 25,000 words. I'm gonna probably be clocking in somewhere around 22. Like I'm not that far behind and I haven't been trying to win in any way. It's so weird. I'm not saying that I'm gonna end up trying to win NaNoWriMo. I've just been feeling very motivated and wanting to work on my book, and it's exciting. So today I'm hopefully gonna just do a lot of writing, do some reading. I'm just about to start reading You Exist Too Much by Zaina Arafat. I think also told in like a vignette style, which my book is told in a vignette style, so I'm hoping that this provides a bit of inspiration. This has been one of my most anticipated reads of the year. My book is told in a vignette style. It's a bit easier to maintain momentum. If a scene isn't working, that scene is so brief that it's so easy to just glide past it and come back to it to edit it later. You know, like with Honey Vinegar, that book was told in a much more traditional narrative structure, like pretty long scenes, like 4,000-ish word chapters. Just the narrative structure, narrative style was very traditional, which there's nothing wrong with. That made sense for that book. And I found when I got stuck in that book, it was much more of an event. Like it was much harder to work through. Obviously that book was much more plotty, and so there was a lot more like plot logistics and stuff to deal with when I got stuck, and I just feel like it was much harder to make quick progress, whereas here the book is very light on plot, and because everything is told in very short vignettes, I feel like it's very easy to keep up momentum, because when you hit a hard scene, that hard scene could be literally one paragraph, and I find it's quite easy to keep quick momentum. Instead of taking several days to write a scene, I'm writing several chapters in a day because the chapters are so brief. I would say it's the most experimental thing I've ever written. Like Honey Vinegar was a very like traditional narrative structure, which again is cool, but this is more experimental. Obviously I've talked about the point of view before, how it's like a second person referral witness omniscient ghost narrator. If you just had an aneurysm, so did I. And if you also decided to unsubscribe because I said that sentence, I would understand. But the narrative style is also a bit more flexible. Like this is why I restarted the book, because in the first take, it was like the scenes were a bit shorter, but it was still like a more traditional narrative structure. Like the experimental thing was the point of view, but other than that, it wasn't like experimental. I think it probably was still experimental because anytime you're writing in second person referral witness omniscient ghost point of view, I feel like you're in experimental territory, but it wasn't like the book itself was super, like the narrative structure was super strange, whereas I decided this time to try it with a more experimental narrative style. So obviously some of it's told in vignettes, There were shorter scenes in the first draft, but this time it's like vignettes, like scenes are very short. Each scene almost feels like writing a prose poem to me. The structure is also very flexible and it changes depending on the chapter. So like sometimes the dialogue is in a transcript and sometimes some chapters are like lists, and I expect the form to continue to evolve and let it do whatever it wants to do. Like there's a scene where the main character registers in a psychology study on the grieving process. In the original version, like she just went and did the thing and it was a pretty brief scene, but this time I actually like inserted some of the questions from the study and like the narrative took that style. So I'm finding it very fun to play with the form and let the narrative do whatever it wants to do. It's very exciting. I'm a bit of like a form nerd, so this is like super fun to me. I don't know, you know, there's like that zeal, that excitement when you first start writing a book and it's just like the only thing you can think of. Like it just kind of is like living rent-free in your mind. I remember that when I first started writing Honey Vinegar and it was so exciting. It was just delightful, you know, like when you can't stop thinking about a book and you're so excited to write it each day. The actual writing process is so electric as you're like uncovering the story and like watching it unfold. I didn't really have that as I started writing the book. I'd written the first chapter like a year ago just to kind of experiment with the voice and what I wanted to do, and I'd had that excitement. But when I started writing the book again in March, I didn't have that. Maybe it coincided with the start of the pandemic because literally it was the exact same time. But I just feel like I never connected with it the way that I would want to, and I finally have, and it's so, so exciting. It's almost weird. I'm writing the book so much faster than I thought I would. You know, Honey Vinegar took 18 months. And even though I was pretty sure this book wouldn't take that long, because it's not as, first of all, just in terms of word count, Honey Vinegar is about 90,000 words, and I think this book will be like 60,000 maybe. I had more planning going in. Like with Honey Vinegar, when I started writing it, I literally didn't know what year was set in. Like I had done no planning whatsoever. This book has been living rent-free in my mind since 2018, so obviously some amount of progress has been made. I know the general skeleton of the plot, maybe not every single step along the way, but I know everything that happens and I know what I'm working towards. So I knew it would write a bit faster, but the thing is, I could reasonably finish writing this book by the end of this year, which is just insane. I don't think I'm gonna try to. I think I'm gonna ease back off in December because I have some other things I want to do. I have some final edits to do on Honey Vinegar before I send it to like critique partners. I've got some short stories to edit. I expected this to take so much longer, and now the project is just evolving at such a quick rate, and it's almost a little scary. It's like I didn't expect for this to be over so quickly. I thought that this was going to be like a chapter of my life that would be like years, kind of like Honey Vinegar was, but instead it's turning, I don't know, it's really strange. I'm like having a crisis that I've been too productive. I need to calm down. So I was just saying in that last clip that the form of this book is very flexible and that it kind of shifts and does different things. I thought I would kind of show you guys what I mean by that. So this is one of the chapters that's like in a different form. I'm showing you this one because doesn't really spoil anything, and you can kind of read it on its own out of context. The chapter is called Questions You Don't Want the Answers To, and it's just a list of questions that the main character does not want the answers to. These are the kind of things that appear at various points, and if I scroll to the beginning, so like this is the first chapter, it's not titled anything, it's just a Roman numeral, which some of the chapters are just titled Roman numerals because there's nothing really more significant to title them after, but most of them have titles that kind of indicate what the chapter is doing formally. So yeah, it's just told in kind of like little chapter vignette sections. So this is the second chapter. Again, the title here is just to indicate how the form works, so it's called Party Transcript. The narrative, it is a scene. It's organized by the timestamps. So then like the next one is 11:30 p.m. and then like this one is called Someday because it's actually like the ghost narrator is omniscient of this book, and so it's the ghost narrator like jumping into the future and saying something the main character doesn't know, which is what the square brackets mean. That appears a couple times throughout. This is my document with kind of like my list of chapters that I just add to as I write them, or else it would be very confusing for me if I don't have a way of keeping track of all of it. So yeah, there are obviously a lot of chapters. We're on chapter 25 and I'm 20,000 words into the book, so most of them are very short. And that's the style that I want. I don't know why there's this like weird thing that a lot of people think that like longer chapters equals better writing and that like you're smarter if your chapters are longer, when how long your chapter is just like, it is completely irrelevant to your skill as a writer or how intelligent your writing is. Really, I think of chapters more as affecting the pacing. So here I want the pacing to be quite quick, almost to balance out the fact that nothing really happens. But also part of it is to reflect the way that the narrative feels to the character. I want this book to feel very like floaty and hazy and dreamlike and delicate, ghost-like, you know, like the main character herself kind of feels like a ghost. It's told from the perspective of a ghost, and so it's these little vignettes kind of floating from one to the other. I think of the structure of this novel as basically being like a poem, so the chapters and scenes are more like stanzas and lines and verses in how they're connected rather than the typical like scene structure that you would have in a novel. And I want it to have that very delicate ghostly feel, so that's why I'm using a form like this. Whereas in my last novel, I wanted it to have a very traditional narrative form. Like, that's a book about storytelling and the effect of storytelling on the people in the stories, and so it made sense to lean into a more traditional style of narrative structure, and it was also more accurate to how the main character perceived the story. You know, like in that book, the main character is telling her story in a very rich, detailed way. That's how she experiences it and how she wants to tell it. Because, like, the character in that book is kind of like telling the story as a way of taking ownership of her life's narrative, which has been told in like very inaccurate, twisted ways by other people. So her telling the story itself is like an act of agency, and so she's telling it in a very detailed way. Here it's completely different, and I want the narrative to reflect that, so that's kind of what I'm doing with the form. Yeah, I don't know, like, obviously I'm a discovery writer, so I kind of just let things go where they go and evolve how they evolve. So I'm just gonna go for a walk, kind of as a way to clear my mind as I finish up my work day and start doing some writing. But I've got to admit, it is pretty gnarly out there today. I also don't really feel like writing. I'm feeling kind of lazy, which maybe is good because I've been writing at kind of breakneck speed the past couple days. So having a chill day of writing where I just, you know, write for like 20 minutes maybe is what I need. It's later that day. I'm about to start writing. It's 5:13. Today is one of those days where I don't really feel like writing. If I wasn't doing this challenge, I probably wouldn't write. I'm watching a movie tonight with my roommates and someone in my bubble. We're doing that at 7:30. Obviously, I still have plenty of time to write, but I think I don't really like writing when I have things to do later. Like, I like to know that I just have as much time to write as I want. So having a bit of a time limit usually isn't like my thing. So I'm probably just gonna try to do a sprint. Maybe just one sprint and call that a day. Hello. So as you can see, it is very dark, and I just decided we're gonna just roll with that. The daylight is gone and there's nothing I can do. So it's about 6 p.m. I haven't done any writing because I haven't really been home today. I went on a long walk to the beach with my roommate. So there are a few things to say. It's been a bit of a lighter week of writing. The first 2 weeks were both pretty intense. I think I wrote like 10,000 words, and then like over that the second week. I wasn't so far behind that if I like tried to catch up, I wouldn't have been able to. But I decided to like purposely slow down because I think I was writing a bit quicker than I was wanting to and comfortable with, which I know is quite a take in today's productivity focused culture. The fact that I was close to winning made me put pressure on myself that I should just try to win. I didn't want to be doing that, and so I decided to slow down, and now I'm far enough behind that I feel like there's no pressure. The other part of why I wanted to slow down is just because I like to savor my first drafts and take my time with them. When I was younger, you know, I would write really fast. That was like my goal, to write super fast, and it's totally fine if you like to write super fast. I know that that works for some people. The books that I wrote really fast, I barely remember writing them. The one year that I did NaNoWriMo and I wrote my whole book in like 24 days, I kind of regret that. Like, I don't remember writing that book. I feel like when you're writing a book, it kind of like colors your whole experience and memories from that time of your life. And I feel like this book is so like beautiful to me. I want to stay in that world of the first draft for a little bit longer. I don't want to rush it and be done the book in a month and a half, because you only get that once, and for me the first draft is my favorite part of the process. It's something I enjoy so much. I really don't want to rush it and just be like done the first draft super quick just because I could, when I want to savor it. I had like, you know, I think like a 400 word day, a 900 word day, 500 word day, and stopped kind of feeling like I should just keep writing, which it's easy to do with my book because the scenes are so short that it's easy to just like keep writing another and another and another and another. I honestly couldn't be happier with how it's turning out. Obviously it's a huge relief, like duh, but I feel like part of why it's such a huge relief is because it's the second time I restarted this book. I have been with this book in some capacity since 2015. Obviously it started as a different book. It started as a YA contemporary novel with a different plot and different like side characters, and then I turned it into this book, which I'd been planning for like 2 whole years, and then I started writing it in March and wasn't happy with it, so I went back and kind of about like 10,000 words into that I realized I wasn't happy with it, so I kind of restarted, mainly just edited it heavily, didn't fully restart. Got 20,000 words in and I started to feel like I did not made the right narrative choices and decided to start again to be planning a book for 2 years, because I'd been planning this draft for 2 years. I had never even conceptualized that I should try the formative stuff that I'm trying, like all the weird form things, never even crossed my mind. And so to restart kind of on a whim after planning it for 2 years, thinking I was going to write it a certain way for 2 years, and then to just get this idea one day and roll with it was kind of scary, because I felt like if it doesn't work, it would almost be like maybe the book just can't work. Like if it doesn't work in this form after not working in like 5 other different forms, maybe something about the story fundamentally is just doesn't really work, you know? Like that was a worry of mine, that I would start writing it and it would be yet another failure at this idea. It is working, and I'm really, really overjoyed with how it's turning out. I'm having so much fun writing it, and so I didn't want to rush that. I wanted to take my time with it because I'm having so much fun writing it. It's basically all there is to say. Hello. So it's a bit of a gray, rainy day. It's about 3:02. Well, it's not about, it's exactly 3:02. I think for me at the moment with NaNoWriMo, I've kind of gotten what I wanted to get out of it. Coming into the month, I wanted to write every day just for the challenge of writing every day, right? That was my goal. But I think kind of like in terms of personal goals, there were kind of 2 things I wanted to get out of it. First of all was to rewrite the portion of Holding a Ghost that I had written back in the spring and that I wasn't happy with, and where I wanted to change the form. And I achieved that like a week ago. I think the second thing that I wanted was kind of just to get my book working for like the first time, because it hasn't been working. It didn't work, and that has also happened. I'm feeling like this is really on a roll. I have a lot of momentum. I'm at the point where I pretty much do know everything that happens until the end of the book. Like I said, it's not going to be a super long book. I'm 27,000 words in right now, so that's probably maybe around halfway through the book, if not just under halfway through, because I expect the book to be between 50 and 60,000 words. From this point on, I pretty much do know everything that happens, so I feel like I could kind of coast to the end. This is interesting because this calls back to something I said in an older writing vlog. If you watched my vlog called Starting a New Book, which was where I started writing Holding a Ghost back in March, there's a clip of me in that vlog saying that every single time I'm writing a book, I think that the next book I want to write is going to be so much easier. And so I was saying, for the record, here I am writing the new book, and it's not easier. It's the same. It's always as hard. But I don't think that's necessarily true. Obviously, the journey to get here with this book was hard because it took like 8 million different forms. I had to change everything 74,000 times. Now that the book is actually on a roll, I would say it genuinely is easier to write than my last novel, Honey Vinegar. I loved writing Honey Vinegar, don't get me wrong. It was delightful. I loved it. I've spoken before. I had a great time writing that book. Yes, it took 18 months, but it was a delightful 18 months. So I love that book. It's my whole heart. But I made a heart with my hands there. That was like really cringy. I've never done that before in my life. What was that? I guess the persona I put on for the cameras is fake. I loved that book. Genuinely, at the moment, this is easier to write. There was never a period of time where I wrote 27,000 words uninterrupted of Honey Vinegar. And I don't think I could have. This book, genuinely easier to write, which is interesting because the form is very experimental, and the form of honey vinegar was extremely traditional. I think it's kind of interesting because I feel like normally you associate experimental fiction with being hard to write, and it's not that it's inherently easier or anything, but I think in this case it's making the book easier to write for a few reasons. One, there's no plot. Really, there's no plot, but the plot is extremely subtle in this book. Rather than there being like this kind of big story, like honey vinegar has a story. Like I remember in a video once people were like joking and people were like, oh, I bet nothing happens in honey vinegar because it's, and you'll just say, oh, that's fine because it's lit fic. No, things happen in honey vinegar. Things happen. The plot of that book is just off the wall insanity. This book, nothing happens in this book. It's more just like a portrait of a meaningful period of time in the character's life. Now that I think about it, the things that I got tripped up on the most with honey vinegar was all plot. I wasn't caught up on character, I wasn't caught up on setting, I was caught up on plot. The times where I got stuck were because I didn't know how to connect point A to B because there were so many complicated things and logic and cause and effect, and you know, the dominoes had to be aligned and they had to all tip properly. There aren't really dominoes here. Obviously there are events, but they don't have like tight causal relationship every single step along the way, which obviously, I mean, is what a good book is supposed to be. So maybe I'm just saying, hey, my book is bad and that's why it's easy to write. I don't know. I've read books in this style where they're very light on plot and it's really just about a character, and the plot is very messy and it's more just like the thread of messy human emotion and change over a period of time. It's not necessarily like anything wild that's happening. I think that helps because the thing that would normally trip me up is not a factor, which is great. And honestly, the form is helping, I think. I'm finding that I don't really get stuck on scenes as much. Like if I get to a scene and it's hard to write, first of all, because the scene structure is so brief, if I don't like a scene, it can just literally be a paragraph long. Like a lot of the scenes are literally one paragraph, or even when they're a bit longer, they're very short. So again, with honey vinegar, when I didn't know how to write a scene, they were like full length, big fleshed out scenes. And so when I was stuck, it was really stuck. Here, it's a lot easier to breeze past and know that I can just come back and fix it up later. And that part of the book is really quite short because every scene is so short. Also, because the form is so flexible, it's not like every single chapter is just written in standard narrative, like the form changes all the time. I'm finding, and maybe this is a bit of a cheat, but because the form can kind of do whatever I want, if I feel like a scene's not working, I just change the form. It gives me a different way to see the scene and access the scene. Away we go. So like I was writing a scene the other day, not yesterday, but the day before. So Sunday. And that scene in question was a scene that I knew had to happen. Big game-changing scene, I would say. As game-changing as things can be in this book where there's no plot. But important scene for the character. Changes the trajectory of a core relationship. I knew that this scene had to happen, and I'd known that since I first knew that I was going to be writing this book. But I never really knew how to approach the scene. I didn't know like how to approach it linguistically. Like for me, a lot of the time I'll hear the language of a scene long before I write it. I didn't have any language in mind. I didn't even really know like how to choreograph it. I just knew this needs to happen. If I had just been writing it as like a standard narrative scene, I would have fumbled around with the dialogue and how like for ages and probably gotten really stuck. But instead, I could just format it in the way that made most sense to me. Organized it in sections with like timestamps, and it was more like floaty and kind of like puzzled together, and I really like how it turned out. I think it's fun to read. I don't know if I said this in another clip, but I basically see the book. This is gonna sound like so pretentious, and like I'm sorry, but like that's my brand. I kind of see like the book basically as just like a giant poem. Obviously like in a narrative there are events, and the linking of the events is what moves the narrative. Whereas in a poem, the movement is more from like the juxtaposition or placing of images next to each other. So like you have an image and you have another image next to that image, and your brain naturally creates meaning between those two images and then to the next, and that's kind of how you move through the poem. So you have like image, idea, image, kind of. I don't know. I'm not really a poet. That's just kind of my take. But you know, not necessarily a narrative, it's more about when you put two things next to each other. I mean, it's like this in a book too. Like if you put two scenes next to each other, like let's say you're just writing a book with like a standard narrative form. and you have a scene in the fictive present, and then you have a flashback. The reader is automatically going to find parallels between those two scenes and ask themselves, and even if not consciously, and find reasons why the flashback is important to what's happening right now. That happens kind of similarly in poetry, where like if you give me an image of an apple and then you give me an image of a doll, as the reader you string those things together and you find movement between them, even if they're just standalone images or ideas. And so obviously there is more of a narrative here because it is still a novel, not a poem, but I see the plot as being spurred more by kind of like the potential energy and like the magnetism between images and like moments. You know, like the main character is a photographer, and so in a way I almost see it as like, in my mind, maybe the book is like flipping through a reel of photographs, you know, image next to image next to image. It's more like moment next to moment next to moment, but the placing of moment to moment to moment to moment creates movement and creates meaning between the moments. So it's much more like a poem. I'm finding it very fun. Honestly, I'm having so much fun. Short scenes, honestly, how did I ever write full-length scenes? And when I think about it as a reader, I think I prefer short scenes anyways. All coming up roses is what I'm saying. But yes, I have slowed down a little bit in terms of like productivity, just because I'm not really worried about it. I was really amped up on my progress earlier in the month, and now I think I'm kind of just like, I'm not really trying to write any certain amount. Like, I'm obviously still writing every day and I'm enjoying writing every day, but it's not really a concern. That's about all for now. This is the only thing I've really worked on, to be honest. Like, I think on Sunday I did edit a short story just because I wanted to edit a short story because I haven't been submitting things and I just needed serotonin so bad, and the only thing that could provide me serotonin would be to submit a story a bunch of times and check back constantly to see if it switched to in progress on submittable. But other than that, I've just been working on this one book, obviously because of NaNoWriMo. I think the thing with me is, because I have done NaNoWriMo many times and I used to be very serious about it, I have this little like monkey brain instinct that kicks in and is like, you must win NaNoWriMo, which is why there were a couple days where I was only like 2,000 words behind, and it would have been quite easy for me to catch up and try to win for the rest of the month. And even though that was not the goal, my little monkey brain, my little NaNoWriMo monkey brain was like, do it. And I was like, no. So obviously that ship has sailed. The point of no return, I think, has passed. Like, I'm not gonna win at this point, but that's okay because it's never the goal. It was actually the goal to not. But I do still think that it being NaNoWriMo does give me this extra little motivation because I have so many associations with it from when I was younger, where I did it so seriously. Like, I was so serious about NaNoWriMo. Like, it really was, yeah, it was not something that I took lightly. There's not really going to be that much to update on in the rest of the vlog. I'm definitely not going to update every day just because everything's kind of just going smoothly. We're in like lockdown right now, so I feel like my vlogs are really boring because I feel like other people are so much better at vlogging than me, because they like take clips of them going places and doing things and seeing people, whereas like I said, we just went into another lockdown and I was already like pretty serious about my social distancing beforehand, and so I feel like my vlogs are really boring because it's just like me trying to find different angles of the same room to talk about writing, because I don't do other things ever with my life because I can't. Anyways, that's all I've got for today. So, I hope you guys can hear me fine with my mask on. It's the 29th, so it's the second last day of NaNoWriMo. Nothing is really that interesting to report, to be honest. I will say, I'm somewhat over it. Kind of over this whole having to write every day thing. Kind of tired. Kind of would like to take a break. It's fine. No regrets, as they say. Maybe since like Wednesday, I've been kind of feeling a little tired and just wanting a break. I'm a little bit over it. I've just been writing lower word counts, like been clocking in more like 400, 500, 600. Nothing wrong with writing 400 words in a day. I think for me it's just outside of this context, outside of NaNoWriMo, that's a really low word count for me, personally. For me, an average day of writing is more like 800 to 1400, I would say. And so for me, if I'm writing like 400 to 600 words, it doesn't feel like a satisfying, complete, full writing session. My brain just knows that it's time for a break and that I want a break soon, but there's only 2 days left, so it's not a big deal. Probably just have a light day of writing today and spend most of the day watching The Umbrella Academy instead of doing anything productive, because it's fine, because the point isn't to win. Hey guys, so it's the last day of NaNoWriMo. I decided to film this clip outside just for a change of scenery because this vlog I feel like has been so aesthetically uninteresting. It is pretty late, it's around 4, so I haven't written today, obviously because I've been at work because it's Monday. I really don't feel like writing today. I think it's a combination of 2 things. One, my brain is just tired creatively. You know, I have loved doing this challenge. Honestly, it was great. Last like 5 or so days, I really have just started to feel creatively tired. You know, that's normal. Back in like late August, early September, I was writing almost every day. It was about 3 weeks before I felt like that habit started to wane. So this is like a normal thing for me, for my creativity to be very up and down. I talked about this in the last clip, but feel a bit of a lessening, not of motivation, but of energy. It has nothing to do with the book. The book is great. I am so happy with the book. I honestly couldn't be happier with how it's turning out. There are so few sections or scenes that I'm not exceedingly happy with, especially considering it's just a first draft. And I definitely feel like I've gotten through the hardest part of the book. Obviously, it's in little chapters that are very short. I anticipate for there to be, I think, 5 sections total, so the book is in parts. I expect that there will be 5 parts total, and I'm on part 3. I definitely think part 2 was the hardest part. Part 1, pretty clear, you know, I'd already written that content. Part 3, I pretty much knew. Part 4, super clear to me. I pretty much know everything that happens. And that's the part I'm most excited to write. And then part 5, I pretty much know everything that happens, as that's the end. Part 2 was the hard part where I just had to bridge things, get some plots moving. I didn't really know how to do that. So this NaNoWriMo really, I think, was great for getting me through the part of the book that would have been the hardest. And had I not been doing NaNoWriMo, probably would have gotten stalled on, probably would have procrastinated, probably would have overthought, because I would have just had infinite amount of space to accomplish it. And so I think I would have overthought it, whereas because I was doing this challenge, kind of just told myself, just get something on the page, just write something, you can come back and fix it later. And I ended up liking the content that I wrote to get through to the part that I like. Like I said, I can't be happier with how the book is turning out. So my creative tiredness is not due to the book, it's just that I can just feel that my brain needs a rest. Like, I've been writing not a lot the past few days. There were still days where I didn't really feel like writing, started writing and enjoyed the writing session and was happy with what I produced, but in general, the past week or so, been feeling more tired. My brain just needs a break. I also normally write multiple projects, so I feel like I have a lot of projects that I really want to get back to. When I started this challenge, I was telling myself that this was just write every day and I can do whatever I want. It doesn't have to be Holding a Ghost. I ended up pretty much just working on Holding a Ghost. I think in just like the spirit of NaNoWriMo, I ended up just wanting to do that. It was nice to immerse myself in the book. That's something I'd been missing, was immersion with this project. Comparing it, this whole vlog has just been me comparing this to my last book. But when I was writing Honey Vinegar, I felt so immersed in it all the time, especially during the periods of time where I was really sinking into it and drafting it. I never really got the feeling of immersion here, and I was sad about that, and I was missing that. That's what I wanted. That's what I'd been excited about, was to be immersed in it, and I got that now. From this point on, I pretty much know everything that happens till the end. As everyone knows, I'm a discovery writer, so I don't have an outline, but I did write out a loose plot summary before I started writing. It doesn't hit all the scenes or even come anywhere near close. It just basically laid out the general arc as I saw it in my mind, because I already saw it in my mind. The way I've been writing it is, because the chapters are so short, it is a little overwhelming to, every time I get to a new chapter, have no idea what it's going to be, because that happens every like 700 words, because the chapters are baby chapters. So what I've been doing is plotting out the next like 4 to 5 chapters very loosely. So it's just like, this event will happen, this event will happen, this event will happen, not breaking it down by scene or anything, and then writing those. And that's really flexible. Like the last group, I plotted them out, and it's even changed. I've added things in and moved things around. So it's not like rigid outline, just because there are so many moving pieces in a book that is vignette style that it's nice to have a little bit of direction. I think it would be overwhelming to try and plot it all out like in an outline because there are so many moving pieces. It's like there are so many moving pieces that it would be overwhelming to fully plot, but also overwhelming to literally just take one step at a time. Been taking it a couple steps at a time, and that's been a really great system for me at this stage of the game. Is there anything else I want to say about this? I don't know. Writing for today, I guess. I'll put up how much I end up writing for the month. I've written 31,000 something at the moment. I don't think I'm gonna write much today. To be honest, I'm not having a great day. Nothing major or anything, but I just had kind of a bad day. Like, not a bad day, but like a frustrating day at work. The main thing I wanted to do today was film a new batch of videos for the Reezy channel, obviously. Just to clarify, sometimes when I say I have to film videos for work, people think this channel is my full-time job. It is not. The revenue I make from this channel doesn't even come close to covering my rent. This is just for funsies. But for the Reezy channel, I was gonna film a new batch of videos, which is something that like I need to do to edit them, to get things done this week. Someone was using a leaf blower really loudly, and so I couldn't do it in the morning. And then as soon as they were done, I was like on it and I was gonna go film, and literally I got the camera set up, I was ready to film. As soon as I set up the camera, my neighbors started like sawing something. I don't know. I have this weird vendetta with my neighbors because they do construction all the time, and I'm under the impression that it's not for their job, it's just for fun. They just like to do construction on random things. And I look over and they're just always like sawing things, hammering things, sanding things with like electrical sanders. It's like they could sense my fear because I sat down to film and then they immediately started sawing something. On top of the fact that I'm kind of creatively drained anyways, I don't think I'm gonna write much. Like, even though it's the last day of NaNoWriMo, I probably am gonna just write like a couple hundred words and be done. That's all I have for this video. I've just been bitching about my neighbors for the past 3 minutes. Had to get that off my chest. It's gonna be a weekday of writing to close off this challenge. I'm gonna write so little. Barely anything, but that's okay. So anyways, before my phone dies, because it's almost dead, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, you can always send me an ask on Tumblr, and I'll see you in another video. And please let me know how your NaNoWriMo went in the comments.